In June of 2023, a team of scientists made a wager that almost everyone believed would fail. They released 19 small wildcats into a wilderness area twice the size of the city of London. At the time, public opinion saw this as a risky project surrounded by doubt. People did not believe that cats weighing less than 6 kilograms could survive golden eagles and freezing winters, especially when the species had been declared extinct 5 years earlier. But 11 months later, a strange GPS signal appeared. One female cat had remained motionless at a single point for many weeks. When the rescue team approached and set up camera traps to check her condition, they captured footage that overturned every previous calculation. It was an image that had not appeared in the wild in Britain for more than a decade. It silenced every criticism and solved the problem that conservationists had been stuck on for so long. The most legendary predator in Britain had left behind a sign, something no algorithm could ever have predicted. So what exactly appeared under the infrared lens? And what is really happening? The individuals that appeared on those camera trap screens were the result of a secretive breeding process. These were animals trained in an environment without any human presence, so they could preserve the purest hunting instincts possible. When the cage doors opened, each individual carried a specialized GPS tracking device around its neck, sending raw data to satellites hour by hour, so scientists could monitor the survival effort of a species once believed to have vanished. Many people asked why the number was 19, and why not 100 or 200? In reality, this was the minimum number calculated to create a seed population without causing a loss of genetic diversity. But look at the map of 600 square kilometers of rugged terrain, dense pine forest, and deep ravines. 19 individuals is an extremely tiny ratio compared with the scale of the area. International experts had warned that the mortality rate in the first year could reach as high as 70%. If more than 14 failed to survive, the project worth millions of pounds would collapse completely. To reach the figure of 19 genetically pure individuals, the team at RZSS Wild Genes had to carry out the largest genetic screening operation in the history of wildcat conservation. They analyzed more than 1,000 DNA samples from ancient museum collections to identify the original genetic code of the Scottish wildcat before it was hybridized. The results showed that most wildcats living in zoos in Britain were, in fact, not pure enough. The project was forced to import the individuals with the strongest genetic profile from conservation centers in Europe in order to refresh the bloodline. This was an expensive and controversial technical process, because many people feared that bringing in cats from the continent would damage the native character of the species. Yet laboratory data showed that Scottish wildcats and European wildcats share more than 90% genetic similarity, enough to save a population already suffering from genetic decline. Consider one reality: if it were you, would you spend millions of dollars to save a 6-kilogram cat? Or use that money to bring wolves and bears back? Many critics argue that saving one small cat is an inefficient investment, while the true ecosystem-shaping species are still waiting. But scientists insist that without this cat, the original identity of the Highland ecosystem will no longer exist. Which side do you choose? Comment Team Cat if you believe every species deserves to be saved, or Team Big Beasts if you prioritize the rulers of the ecosystem. Do not scroll past, because your opinion sits at the center of the greatest conservation debate of this century. No matter how fierce the argument becomes, the scientists continue to stand by their choice, because they know this animal is not just a cat. It is the soul of the Highlands, waiting to be awakened. To understand why the world was so astonished by this return, you have to know what the Highland tiger truly is. This is the only wildcat species left in the British Isles, carrying a lineage from the Ice Age. Biologically, they are completely different from domestic cats. Their skulls are broader, and their jaw muscles are far stronger, allowing them to neutralize prey in a single bite. Their thick cylindrical tail, with its distinctive solid black rings, is an unmistakable identifying feature. DNA analysis results at the University of Oxford showed that Scottish wildcats possess unique cold-resistant genes, allowing their fur to remain water-resistant even in the high humidity conditions of the Highlands. This is a biological armor that domestic cats can never possess. They are solitary ghosts, capable of living their entire lives without ever being seen by humans. But this apex predator was eliminated by 3 waves of population decline in the past. The first was hunting in the 19th century, followed by the destruction of 98% of native pine forest for farmland, and finally the disaster of genetic hybridization. When wildcat numbers became too low, they were forced to breed with feral domestic cats, causing the pure bloodline to gradually disappear. Data from 2015 showed that nearly 90% of individuals believed to be wildcats were in fact only hybrids, carrying more than 50% domestic cat genes. This created a crisis of biological identity. Are we conserving a species, or only a shadow of the past? By 2018, this animal was officially declared functionally extinct. The Saving Wildcats project was the final effort to return gene lines with more than 75% purity to the wild. But they did not simply release them, they applied a strategy called soft release. The cats were kept in large temporary enclosures to get used to the smells and sounds of the deep forest before the final gate was opened. This strategy borrowed its idea from the successful reintroduction of the black-footed ferret in North America. The release sites were equipped with automatic feeding systems where the cats had to hunt live prey released at night instead of being fed under captive routines. This was a strict test, and any individual unable to hunt on its own would not be sent into the wild. But nature never welcomes newcomers gently. As soon as the project began, the first challenges appeared. Within only the first 5 weeks, the atmosphere of optimism was quickly replaced by extreme tension. One female cat collapsed from a wound infection, and shortly afterward the monitoring screen showed 2 motionless red dots. 2 males had lost signal completely in the middle of a violent snowstorm. Conflicting public opinion began to erupt, with many claiming that taking animals accustomed to human care and placing them into such a harsh wilderness was a death sentence from the very beginning. The silence of the GPS collars during those winter days in the Highlands was truly a brutal psychological test for the expert team. With snow, more than 1 meter deep, sealing off every corner, searching for prey in burrows and hollows was almost impossible for these new arrivals. The scientists had to hold their breath while watching every smallest movement on the heat map, where the individuals sometimes had to go hungry for many days and hide deep inside rock crevices just to preserve body heat. Alongside the cold, a silent but brutal survival war broke out with the local red fox population. The traces left behind on the white snow, from scattered tufts of fur to dried blood stains, showed that the wildcats had to face fierce territorial competition in order to protect their scarce food supply. These small wildcats, by some miracle, had begun to reveal the fighting instincts of their ancestors in order to drive back invaders larger than themselves in size. At that moment, every scientific forecast leaned toward failure. The projected survival rate dropped below 30%. And yet, in April of 2024, a strange change appeared on the heat map. 2 female cats that had previously ranged very widely suddenly narrowed their movement to one single point for 3 straight weeks. In biology, this has only one meaning: nesting. But this was far beyond expectations. According to earlier forecasting models, captive-bred wildcats would need at least 2 to 3 years to adapt before they could reproduce. At the end of May in 2024, an infrared camera placed in the Cairngorms captured a historic moment. In the dim light, a wildcat kitten, less than 4 weeks old, stepped out of a rock den for the first time. At least 2 litters of kittens had been born from 2 different mothers in the same season. This proved 3 astonishing truths. First was navigational instinct across an immense area. These solitary cats had found one another to mate without any human intervention. Second was hunting skill. Mothers that had grown up in captive conditions had become capable enough to feed themselves and their litters in the harshest environment. Third was ecosystem revival. The birth of kittens meant that the food chain had been connected again. Detailed image analysis showed that the kittens had extremely sharp reflexes and strong physical condition, proving that the mothers had become seasoned hunters in the deep forest. One detail that astonished biologists was the location of their den. the mothers had chosen ancient rock dens that wildcats had used hundreds of years earlier. This suggests that there is a form of landscape memory buried deep in their genetic code, guiding them back to the most strategic locations once occupied by their ancestors. However, an even larger question was raised about the genetic origin of these kittens. Researchers had been worried about the possibility of hybridization with the remaining feral domestic cats. They had to wait for months to collect scat samples from around the den area. The DNA analysis results from the RZSS laboratory were deeply convincing. These were the offspring of purebred males released in the same wave. This confirmed that male and female wildcats had established an extremely effective communication network across 600 square kilometers of rugged terrain. The news spread rapidly, turning Scotland into the center of global conservation attention and proving that efforts to restore an extinct species are entirely possible. At the current stage of this restoration journey, the project is no longer a single experiment. In total, more than 60 wildcat individuals have been released through successive waves. The latest figures show a survival rate more than 40% higher than all the original international forecasts. The impact of the project has gone beyond biology. More than £2.4 million have been invested in the Cairngorms region, boosting ecotourism and creating jobs for local people. The Saving Wildcats project has become a model for the Rewilding Europe program. Countries such as Spain and Portugal are applying the GPS monitoring protocols and soft release strategy from Scotland to save the Iberian lynx. Scotland has proven that restoring an ecosystem does not necessarily have to begin with giant species. The presence of a 6-kilogram predator like the wildcat has triggered a chain reaction. Hare populations are being naturally controlled, giving young pine forests a chance to grow without being chewed apart. At the same time, the pushing back of invasive species has helped native ground-nesting birds increase significantly in number. Every sign shows that nature is reclaiming its natural balance under the regulation of this legendary predator. This brings the total number of purebred wildcats in the wild above the threshold for sustainable maintenance, a crucial milestone for a population to escape the risk of extinction. More than that, a new conservation fund worth £5 million is now being deployed to expand the project into other areas of the Highlands, such as Argyll and Perthshire. At present, drone devices integrated with artificial intelligence are being used to scan dense forests, helping distinguish wildcats from domestic cats accurately through tail and flank characteristics alone. This technology allows scientists to monitor the development of the population in real time without needing to fit every kitten with a GPS collar. The map of Scotland is being covered in green once again by the signal points of legendary predators. Scotland has created a blueprint for all of Europe. If they can revive the rarest cat in the world from zero, then nothing is impossible. This story is proof that nature does not need us to save it. It only needs us to stop destroying it and give back the space for it to strike back. In the Highlands today, green eyes have begun to shine again in the night. The Highland tiger is no longer just a name in the red list. It is a living presence reclaiming its lost kingdom. The world once laughed at this journey, but now it is listening closely to every footstep of the predator in the pine forest. And this is only the beginning of an even larger biological revolution. The successful data from the Wildcat project are now being used to persuade the government about the return of the lynx, a mid-level predator that disappeared from Britain more than 1,000 years ago. The success of this 6-kilogram cat is the key that opens the door for larger beasts to return. Debates in the Scottish Parliament are now unfolding with extraordinary intensity about a future in which roars and the ghosts of the ancient forest are no longer legend. A new era of conservation is taking shape, one in which we no longer stand outside and watch, but truly live in harmony with wild rulers. Are you ready to welcome the next footsteps of nature? Subscribe and join us to witness this historic counterattack.